Before we get some guests to inform our conversation, Mr. Shawcross does not pull his punches. I quote, "Treating terrorism as a mental illness or a social deficiency that can be placated by social services might make acts of extreme violence seem more intelligible to some, yet this approach fails to grasp the inherently ideological nature of radicalisation and terrorism." Mr. Shawcross goes on to blame the low number of Islamist referrals on, quotes, "fear of being accused of being racist, anti-Muslim or culturally insensitive, and that anti-prevent advocacy by domestic Islamist groups had been involved." Let's put that to Hannah Stuart, who's director of the Counter-Extremism Group. Your initial reaction to this report and, of course, to the Home Secretary's response. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. I think it's to be welcomed, both Mr. Shawcross's review and the Home Secretary's robust response. The review's been a long time in the making. It's taken nearly 4 years, but I think it's going to be one of the most important contributions to our counter-radicalisation efforts in over a decade. It really does shake up the kind of... I think there's been a little bit of mission creep in Prevent in recent years, and it's kind of strayed away from its original mission of stopping people from becoming terrorists and supporting terrorism.
What makes it so important in your view, Hannah?
This
report?
Because I think without it, that we were in danger of Prevent this sort of ever metastasization of what Prevent was doing. So there's a lot of good and valuable community and social work that's being done, but it's being done under Prevent, and that's wrong. Prevent is not about social work. Prevent is about countering terrorism. I think Mr. Shawcross is very clear that there are elements of Prevent where people are being referred through this service to access support such as mental health support because they just can't seem to access it elsewhere. This Prevent should not be carrying the weight for the failures of other services. Prevent is foremost about saving lives and countering terrorism, and Mr. Shawcross's review, if the recommendations are enacted in full, which will require a kind of cultural shift, I think, within officials, Prevent will be able to refocus back on what it's supposed to be doing.
Let's be candid. That's going to be uncomfortable for some, isn't it? That sort of cultural switch, Hannah. I remind you of the words here. Prevent officials, there was a fear of being, his words now, a fear of being accused of being racist, anti-Muslim or culturally insensitive. That's quite a change of pace then.
Yes, I mean, driving cultural change anywhere is difficult, and not least in the civil service. But, I've worked before in the civil service, and there are very good, bright people who are well-intentioned and want to do good things. I think sometimes the system can be... There's almost... I've myself have experienced instances where people are thinking, well, we're writing this speech and we're talking about Islamist extremism. What's our far-right example?
This desperate need for balance all the time when it's not required.
When actually maybe that speech was about tackling Islamist terrorism. So that sort of cultural shift is necessary.
Grateful for your time, Hannah. Thank you. Hannah Stuart is director of the Counter-Extremism Group. Let's just quote these figures. Prevent was, quotes, out of kilter, says Mr. Shawcross, with the rest of the counter-terrorism system. He points to 80% of live police investigations are involving Islamist plots or terror. 10% were extreme right-wing. By contrast, 22% of referrals to Prevent concern Islamism. So 80% of live investigations, 22% of referrals. Something's surely gone wrong?